And joining us now, as he always does when we're lucky on Monday mornings, is Joe DiGenova, Fox News legal analyst, former U.S. attorney here in Washington. Hey, Joe.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Well, Joe, one of your clients, of course, is a whistleblower in the Benghazi affair, and President Obama, he made a huge splash last week with his pivot to the economy, because he's only done that 19 times so far, and we have so much to show for it. But during his pivot, he said this.
With this endless parade of distractions and political posturing and phony scandals, Washington's taken its eye off the ball. And I'm here to say this needs to stop.
Joe, I think he's talking about you and your client. You know that distraction and phony scandal about what happened in Benghazi when 4 Americans, including our ambassador, were murdered by terrorists under the president's watch. Can you please respond to the characterization of Benghazi as a phony scandal?
Just when you think our president, has sort of come out and has sort of decided he better be reasonable, he pulls on this totalitarian mantle and picks up the big lie syndrome. Benghazi is more than a scandal. It is one of the most disgraceful acts of inaction by the United States government in the history of this country. Victoria's client, Greg Hicks, and my client, Mark Thompson, told the story under oath in congressional testimony to the House of a government completely bereft of a soul, completely bereft of any sense of responsibility for its men and women in harm's way. They were abandoned. The people at the consulate and on the CIA annex were left to die by the United States government. And what did the president do that night? We will never know, or at least we don't know right now, what he did hour by hour, because they cannot and do not want to tell us. The President of the United States, let me just say this coldly, is a coward. He is a coward because he cannot stand the heat of light of the truth about how he abandoned American military and CIA people on the night of September the 11th, 2012. The President of the United States is a liar and a coward.
All right, so Joe, as I recall, when you started to represent these folks who are whistleblowers on the Benghazi matter, you had some difficulty getting the clearances that you needed, right?
That is correct.
And that's because the Obama administration would not deal with you on that matter, correct?
That is correct.
And there have been other efforts by the Obama administration to sort of slow down any investigation into what happened in Benghazi on that night, right?
That is correct.
So if it's a phony scandal, why are they putting so much effort into impeding the investigation?
And the questions go on, Brian. You hit it right on the head. And the reason is, of course, it's not a phony scandal. It's a real scandal. It's a scandal about the death of Americans at the hands of their own government because of neglect. And, what's interesting about all of that is that they have perfected the art of the lie. Whether it's the Department of State spokespersons lying about things like that, or the president himself, or Jay Carney, they are the ones who have perfected the art of distraction. They are the ones who have decided that these things are so serious, whether it's the IRS or the Justice Department's abuse of their subpoena power to news organizations, or Benghazi, or a host of other things, that they can lie about it with impunity because of a complicit press. As the First Amendment starts to wither and wrinkle at the end of the Constitution, you can blame the press, the people who have responsibility for it, who have caved into this guy. This is their guy. They've waited their whole lives in the press to get this guy elected, and now they're just not going to touch him.
Our guest is Joe DiGenova, and speaking of perfecting the big lie, I'd love for you to jump in here on the spectacle of the New York mayor's race, Joe. And, and specifically, though, the Anthony Weiner, every day there's a new revelation, and yesterday it was discovered that $45,000 of Anthony Weiner's campaign fund was used on a private investigator to investigate the bogus claim that he had been hacked 2 years ago. He knew that it was bogus, but he directed that money to be spent in that way. As U.S. Attorney in Washington, you knew your way around election law. Is it appropriate, or is it potentially illegal to spend campaign money in such a way?
It's not potentially illegal. It is illegal. And at a minimum, it's a violation of the federal election laws and is subject to a civil penalty. It's also theoretically and possibly criminal because it's mail fraud, wire fraud. It involves the stealing of money for an illegal purpose, an improper purpose. He misrepresented on his filings what it was used for when he knew, in fact, that the investigation was completely unnecessary. There's no doubt that he's personally civilly liable for the money, and he could theoretically be criminally liable. There's no doubt about that. That is a false statement under federal law.
Wow. And so now you have still friends at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm sure that you're aware that they are looking into this, right? And they're going to move with great haste.
You know what? I don't know whether they are or not. That would be New York City. It could be D.C. It depends upon where the statement was made. It was probably done in D.C. The money was probably spent in New York, and so venue could very well be in both places. You can forget the Southern District of New York. They're not interested in this. They think they have bigger fish to fry. But other than that, I doubt very much if anyone will look at it, except the Federal Election Commission, which is dysfunctional.
Another one of these phony scandals that the president keeps talking about, I think he's referring to the investigation into the IRS and how they treated Tea Party applications for tax-exempt status. Do you think that's a phony scandal? And what do you make of these reports that there was this guy who was the general counsel who was sort of directing the lower-level folks in Cincinnati? His name is William Wilkins. He turns out to be, as general counsel, one of the few people at the IRS who was a political appointee.
Well, guys, you may not remember this, but about 4 to 5 weeks ago, I said that the general counsel, William Wilkins, on your show, was the key to this entire investigation. And sure enough, there he is. He sits there along with Mr. Science, Jeffrey Science, from OMB, who is now vacationing in South Africa and is unavailable
for comment on any level. That's
right. The IRS scandal is not going to go away, and but the one thing that will hurt it, and this is really John Boehner's decision, is whether or not he's going to unleash the subpoena power of the House of Representatives, which all of the chairmen over there have used, I must say, regrettably sparingly. There is a huge battle going on in the leadership and in the membership of the House of Representatives among Republicans about these investigations not being tough and strong and powerful enough, and that is because they are not using subpoenas. The best example is the Department of State. There have been only 1 or 2 subpoenas issued by the investigators. They keep asking for documents, not getting them, complaining about not getting them, and yet refusing to issue subpoenas because the leadership doesn't want to make it look like they're pounding on the president. And they're so dumb, they don't realize that by not issuing subpoenas and having to whine constantly about not getting documents, they make themselves look exactly like that they're just pounding on him. Issue the damn subpoenas and get to work.
Joe DiGenova, we can always count on you for launching our week the right way.
Don't hold back, Joe. Tell us what you really think.